very good evening to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. The topic which I was given to speak on was best practices survey and mapping, but I must confess that I'm neither a technologist nor either in surveying or in mapping, so I've taken the liberty to change the topic to something which I'm more qualified to speak on or more comfortable to speak on, which is survey and GIS applications, the user's perspective, because that's exactly who I am. So let me just briefly tell you about the company that I represent. It's called iDeCK, which is a joint venture of the government of Karnataka and IDFC Foundation, which is a not-for-profit arm of IDFC, which is one of the largest infrastructure financing companies, and HDFC, which holds a very small percentage in our company. So we play the role somewhere between the users and the government, and our primary aim is to actually help governments in conceptualizing projects and make sure that they move from idea stage to the time that it is put on the ground. So, this is just one of those initial slides which most presenters put up about their company. So we in Karnataka do three things, which is project advisory, which is for all government departments providing advisory services. We also manage two small funds which the government has provided, which is called a project development fund, which we utilize to carry out technical studies for all infrastructure projects. And that is where we interact with service providers like yourselves who do surveys for various types of infrastructure projects. We also have a project investment fund, which we invest into infrastructure projects, more as a measure of confidence building for the investor, private sector investor. So the government is also putting something on the table. So this is largely what we do in terms of services. So if we look at the scope of our services across phases, so we play a hand-holding role right from the development phase to the O&M phase, largely actually in the development phase, very rarely into the O&M phase. And sectorally, we've been in existence since 2000, so it's been 15 years, and in 15 years we've helped government of Karnataka certainly, and also many other state governments across various sectors. And what I will try and do is share some of our experiences in a few of these sectors. Although surveys there done extensively, like Mr. Ansari and Gaurav before that have mentioned, it's done almost across all infrastructure sectors. Most projects require it. So what I'll do is only pick three of these sectors, which is urban transport, solid waste management, and tourism, because these are some things which we've been doing over the last couple of years. So solid waste management, we are currently actually helping BBMP in structuring their collection and transportation contracts. And like all of you who are residents of Bangalore know that it's pretty much of a stink as it is today. So we are trying to do something about it. And what we've tried to do is package, to size these packages using all the GIS data which was available across various departments and agencies in Bangalore. So, and that's when we also came across the fact that, you have GIS data which is available with BWSSB, you have it with BESCOM, you have it with BBMP, you have it with a whole host of agencies, but each one of them is of a different vintage, capturing different types of information. And so we did go around and try and collate all of that, because when we have to size a solid waste management package, you need to know how many households are there in a ward. You need to know how many slums are there in the ward. And both these data we did not get from a single source. We had to go to two different sources. We needed to know how many commercial establishments are there and what kind of commercial establishments. And that again we needed to go to BESCOM. So all of them have their own GIS data which is available, but there isn't a common platform. So I think somebody put up this need to have a common platform. I think Delhi had attempted it, but there are, again, many problems associated with that. I'll come to that later. So having sized the contract, we've also used the mapping data and road network data, etc., for vehicle routing and planning of the vehicle routes in each ward. Street sweeping plan, again, it depends on what's the width of the street, length of the street, etc. So unless you have accurate data on that, it's very difficult to plan it. And if you don't plan it well, you find your streets are filthy. So this was a very important data input. Decentralized processing, that's another element which is being thought of in this current tender, which tries to minimize the waste which is going to the landfill. So you need to have some smaller processing facilities within the ward, and for that we needed to know what open spaces are available in each ward and which of those open spaces are owned by the government. So all of this, again, we had to go back to the GIS mapping data which was available with BBMP. Secondary transportation, again, we had to use road network data for route optimization. Treatment and disposal, the siting of these facilities itself is a huge controversy and a sticky subject. So we had to, again, look at the whole map of BBMP and its surroundings to see where to site these treatment facilities as well as the final disposal units. So we found that, on the plus side, you have data which is available today, which wouldn't be the case about 10 years back. But the only problem that we've encountered is that this is spread across different agencies, and there needs to be some way of bringing it all together on one platform, at least for each ULB, the larger ULBs to begin with. We've also done a fair amount of work on urban transport applications, not here in Bangalore, but in Delhi we have another sister company which is similarly structured. And there we've done a lot of work on public transit systems, which is again, we need to, so you have GPS-based tracking of vehicles, and the whole idea is to offer a better service to users, which means that the passenger standing on a bus stop knows which bus is coming and what time it's going to come. Now for that you need, the critical data inputs you need is, you need to know how many routes are there and what are the bus stops. And we found that even this basic data, which we thought would be very easily available with DTC, was a bit of a challenge, because DTC's internal records on the website showed 543 routes. This STA, which is the authority which issues the routes or issues the permits and notifies the routes, had a database of 657 routes. But when we actually sent people on board buses, we found that DTC was actually plying 995 routes. So, if you don't get the data right, the service that you're finally giving to the customer or the user, commuter who's standing on the street, that is not reliable at all. And once he finds it's not reliable, the whole system goes to waste. So that's one. The second was, even on bus stops, you need to geocode those bus stops and locate those bus stops accurately. Now, as per the database which we got readily, there were about 3,300 bus stops. But when people actually sat on the bus and went on the bus, they found there were in excess of 5,000 bus stops. So, you need to know all of these and map it all correctly onto your system, because without that, you're not going to give a good service to the commuter or do any sort of journey planning which is accurate. The other thing which we've done there was also paratransit management, which is auto rickshaw, have GPS-based meters, etc. But there is very little of mapping application there, or survey applications. Parking management, I remember seeing somebody put up parking management. So that's something which we've done in Delhi, especially in the NDMC area. So each of I think there are about 98 parking lots within NDMC. So each of those have been mapped, and data on the capacity of four-wheelers and two-wheelers, etc., have been, put onto the system. So now you can actually build an application over that which gives you real-time availability of parking. But unless you have the basic mapping data in place, it becomes very difficult to give any sort of service to the actual user. So that's something which we've done. Then the other interesting project which we were trying to do was the Traffic Management and Information Control Center. So this would require various agencies to sit together in a single control room. And the, the basic heart of the whole system is to have a common map and common database of various elements which different users will need to tap into. For example, you will have the public bus transport guys knowing their routes, etc. The parking management will need to put on the data of all the parking lots. So all of that needs to come onto a common map. But this is where we found that, the multiplicity of agencies and stakeholders came in the way, and we're still trying to figure out, how to have a system. And so this is basically a governance issue rather than the fact that, you have all the technology at hand to go out into the streets and capture all of this. But to really make use of that data, you need to set in place a good governance structure which will make it happen and make it sustainable over a period of time. The third thing which we've been doing currently in Karnataka is to try and map tourist locations. So this is again something I think Mr. Ansari had put up, but we aren't actually doing a LiDAR-based survey of the monuments as of now. We are much, much lower on the scale of technology. We are right now just trying to get in place the fact that there are 319 tourist destinations in Karnataka, where they are located, the geocodes of all of those tourist destinations. What are the facilities those destinations have? Does it have a toilet for tourists? Is there a parking place? Is there a tourist information center? So just that, are there signages there? Are there pamphlets which talk about what this monument is all about? So we're just trying to first get the basic database right. And once that is done, we'll probably move to actually having a 3D imagery of the monument itself, and then move onwards to saying how do you preserve that and what sort of interventions to do for improving the infrastructure there. So while we are doing this, we are also capturing a whole lot of other data, which is, what is the timing, what's the fees, who are the contact personnel to get in touch with, tourist arrival data at each of these. So hopefully all of this will continue to get maintained into the future, and we'll be able to use it for planning. There are certain issues and challenges which come to my mind. Basically, in the role that we play, we are neither government nor a technology service provider like yourselves. But in the role that we play, we kind of sense and see issues and challenges being faced by both sides. So I just thought I'll put some of these up for you. You may agree or have faced some of these, but the basic point of putting all this is I thought, it's a good idea for a gathering like this to also brainstorm on what to do next, because I think these are challenges which need to be addressed and need to be overcome in some way. For example, the existing body of knowledge on the government side is limited on technology, and especially on survey and mapping. For example, very recently, even for us, we were planning to do a survey for a road in some state, and we got extremely confusing signals about whether to do LiDAR survey or to just go the traditional total station method. And after many iterations and meeting many people, thankfully we did meet a few who gave unbiased advice, and I hope we are on the right track. But having said that, there are so many technologies going around and so many people trying to educate government and people like us that we often end up more confused than enlightened. there is also vendor-driven approach to many a project preparation initiatives. So, while mapping and survey as a activity is the base, finally you will get to do that kind of activity only when the final application finds takers in the government, and government would be the largest consumer of survey services. And many a times what happens is that, there are vendors who try and mold the thought process within government. For example, even let's just take the solid waste management example, which I just gave you. So, you would have somebody come and tell you that let's do a GPS-based tracking of vehicles. And just as you would think that that seems to be the best idea, you would have someone else walk in the door and say, let's do RFID. And as soon as you try and make up your mind between GPS and RFID, the third guy comes in with a handheld and says, why don't you do a handheld-based solution? Now, all of this has technology implications right up to your mapping and survey requirement as well. So, there needs to be some way of breaking this. I don't have any ready answers, but this is a challenge which we face quite often. Governments also face a huge challenge on getting out of the L1 syndrome, and that again seems to be the bane of many projects, which you go in for L1, you get data and you get survey information which is not accurate at all, and the whole project which you've kind of built based on that survey data goes awry. Funding is again a huge problem, because typically digital mapping is either under budgeted or not budgeted at all when you do a DPR. So when you're doing a DPR for any project, you don't normally say that, okay, when you want to do a implementation, you should have a component which actually maps out the way the infrastructure is being laid out, and that data should be made available to the client. So, there is a cost to that survey. So most DPRs ignore that. As far as governments and ULBs are concerned, doing GIS and mapping and all that, they are pretty low down on the priority list, unless, it's all officer driven. So if the person is inclined and wants to do it, it will get done. But there is no guarantee that, the initiative will be taken forward in the same earnestness. And the biggest problem I have seen is that even if it's done one time, this data has to be updated on a very regular basis, and there is no ring-fenced fund which is available for doing that updation. So if you do it on year one, then year three, by the time you are in year three, Indian cities are changing so rapidly. Most of the data which you have on GIS is probably, you can just use it as a reference point, but not do any great planning using that. So there is a need to have some governance structure. Again, this comes back to governance and policy, where you need to have a governance structure where there is fund which is available for regular updation. And, there are agencies which are supposed to update it. For example, I think Delhi has GSDL, which has all participating agencies, but I doubt whether those participating agencies are actually updating the data. So again, it's something which it's food for thought on how to get over this. There are also technical issues which, may not be for survey, I don't know, but definitely for people who build applications above the survey data and are interacting with government. So, sign off on requirements remains extremely elusive as far as technical application providers are concerned. Governments today, and when I say governments, that also includes agencies like us who are advising governments. We don't know how to handle change requests, especially in the technology domain, because we don't know how efforts are estimated and how to even handle something saying, okay, now this means a change request which is worth 50 lakhs. And so government just doesn't know how to handle that kind of change request. And technology being technology, there would be a lot of change requests which come up. So this again needs to, I'm just pointing this out because most contracts have this element, and it's necessary to have some sort of a framework to address this kind of change request issue. Because otherwise, every time this comes up, the whole contract just goes into a standstill mode without any progress. So, you know, the project suffers finally. And lastly, stakeholders. Yeah, there's just one more point, which is, you know, the industry, again, I'm not talking about survey industry, but the application layer which is built on the survey data and the mapping data. A lot of the application layer is done by vendors who are wedded to proprietary technology. So, you know, and governments over a period of time have been bitten by this proprietariness of technology many a time. So there is also that hesitation into getting into a technology contract which has proprietary elements in it. So we need to figure out how to do that. Maybe having some standards in place would help. And lastly, stakeholders, coming to stakeholders, there is usually, you know, operational staff in the government side are not receptive to many of these IT applications. So there is a resistance to bring in this. So that's a given. So you need to factor that in when these kind of applications are being rolled out. The client-side infrastructure, so if, you know, the client is putting in the servers and all that, so client-side infrastructure, typically after a couple of years, you know, you need an upgrade, but you'll need to budget for it and go in and get an approval for the budget and then go for another tender to get that. So all that gets into a huge rigmarole. So contracts need to be structured to make sure that these upgrades are built into that. And like I said earlier, multiplicity of agencies to deal with, especially for survey agencies and survey data mapping agencies. That is a huge problem because what happens is even if you get all data onto a single platform, very soon you find that out of the 10 agencies which were supposed to contribute to keep that data current, you know, only 3 are contributing. So the rest of the 7 are just not bothered. So after a while, you find that the whole platform has gone to waste. So that's something, again, it's all, you know, so if I look at it from a, if I stand back and look at the big problem, then I find that, you know, maybe 70% of all that's happening is governance related, and 30% is probably related to the industry practices and the proprietariness of technology and the fact that new technology comes in and people are trying to send out confused signals to the client. So, but both aspects need to be addressed if we have to move forward. So having said that, I just want to leave you with those thoughts, and hopefully we'll have fora like this to brainstorm and put forward some distilled thoughts and ideas to the government and policy makers who can enlighten us as we go forward. Thank you.